Really good job, especially last Sunday with going out. Good job.
From the Reverend Gretchen Haley. We who have learned so well how to keep going, come here to pause, to slow down the headlines, the decisions, the daily worries of what is worth the risk.
We come to cease the waiting of joy, to let it all simply be, to let ourselves be.
Here, held in a story bigger than any of us, held in community that is breathing together in this one place, this precious hour. We come to be carried along in our unknowing.
Safe in this place that holds all our stories, ancient and newborn, we come to listen to the wisdom in the walls, witness to all those who've come before, ready to receive all who will come next.
Here we behold each other, holding all our dimensions in awe.
We come seeking courage for this one life, because we know, even now, even still,
we are not done with our changes. Come, let us worship together. Good morning. Welcome to worship at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm the Reverend Sadie Lansdale, and I'm the minister of this congregation. Unitarian Universalists believe that each person has a trustworthy relationship with the Spirit, with the holy, with what some call God, though we name it and know it differently from one another. And we believe that because we are all interconnected, nobody is free until we all are free. So we strive to build beloved community here on earth in our fellowship with one another and in our work for justice. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you have found your way here, welcome. I have some questions that I'll need you to answer for me. Should you have your phone on during church making noise? No. Should you take your mask off? No. What if you feel like it? Where are we singing? If you're joining us online, go ahead and say hello in the chat. And if you're joining us in person, turn around and wave to everybody joining us online. We are so glad to be virtually and in person with you all this morning. Somebody tell me what these wristbands are for. Social distancing. Yeah, comfort level, social distancing. So if I have on a green wristband, what does that mean? What if I have on a yellow wristband, what does that mean? 60. Yeah. If I have on a red wristband, what does that mean? Yeah. You can greet me warmly, but from over there. So to take a minute, look around you, look at the wristbands of the people around you, make any adjustments you need to. This is our practice of consent. This is the way that we gather, knowing that there are safety precautions in place and risks we take because they make our lives meaningful. It is good to be together.
Sadie, we've
Yeah.
got some feedback that we're not able to fix from this end.
What do you need?
Adjust that mic, someone.
Sure. Like just
left upwards.
that. Ooh. Should that fix it?
Is that better?
I don't know. Okay, I'll just keep talking a little bit. It keeps being great to see all of you and to test this microphone. It's great to see you. And also you. That row. Yeah, we're good? Great. Sounds great to see you.
Good morning again. Come on, let's hear it again.
Yeah, that's right.
Good morning. All right. My name is Susan Hill, and I'm a member of this congregation. Mariah Brown will help us light our chalice this morning. Please join us in our chalice lighting words found in your order of service. We light this chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, to remind us to connect in spirituality and service, to care for each other and the world, and to create loving community. Thank you. And now will you join us in our church covenant? A covenant contains the promises we make to one another in response to the great gift of living, holding ourselves to our holy and highest aspirations. We, the members of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greensboro, do covenant to promote a search for personal meaning, respecting the individual truth in a community process of quest. Speak and act with caring, courtesy, and love, thereby maintaining emotional, physical, and spiritual safety for all. Support UUCG and denominational efforts with our resources. Combat injustice while promoting equality. Nurture our children on their spiritual journey. Hold ourselves to this covenant, especially during times of conflict and disagreement.
A fire mist and a planet, a crystal and a cell, a starfish and a saurian, and caves where ancients dwell. The sense of law and beauty, a face turned from the side. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. Haze on the far horizon, the infinite tender sky, the ripe rich tints of cornfields, and wild geese sailing high. And over high and lowland, the charm of goldenrod. Some people call it autumn, and others call it God. Like tides on Crescent Sea Beach, when moons so new and thin, into our hearts high yearnings come welling, surging in. Come from the mystic ocean, whose rim no foot has trod. Some people call it longing, and others call it God. A century lone and frozen, a mother starved for her brood, and Socrates' dread hemlock, and Jesus on the rood, and millions who, though nameless, the straight hard pathway trod. Some call it consecration, and others call it God.
Thank you, Kay. How beautiful it is to be together. We gather in gratitude this morning, turning our hearts to thanks and praise for the gift of living, in the presence of the Spirit that animates all life, and in the knowledge that we are powerfully, profoundly connected to all that is, all that has been, and all that will be. In your e-news, you'll find specific instructions for how to email your particular joys and sorrows. At any time during our service, you can go to our joys and sorrows table and light a candle, a symbol of the ways our burdens are eased and our joys are magnified, knowing they are held in common. I invite you now to offer the names of those people on your hearts, living or dead, near or far, that this community might hold them in prayer and in love. You can type comments if you're joining us online, or you can speak them now. During these few minutes of silence, you can focus on something you're grateful for, someone you're remembering especially today, or just the sensation of your chair supporting you. Will you find a comfortable place in your seat and take a few easy breaths as we settle into our shared silence together? We send all of these prayers, spoken and silent, up to the love that holds us all. Will you join me in prayer? Spirit of life and love, God of many names and no name, we know you in the silence and in the song, in the crisp blue sky, in the fall weather, in the turning of the seasons, in the lengthening of the night and the shortening of the day. We know you in peace and in the longing for peace. We know you in joy and in the longing for joy. We know you even in sorrow and the preciousness of those things, the loss of which causes our sorrow. We think especially of all those refugees on all those borders, seeking to live in the fullness of human experience, fleeing terror, and finding violence instead of welcome. This is our prayer. Where there is fear and trembling, let there be good company. Where there is a yearning, let there be a new way. Where we are tempted to tune it all out, help us to keep our hearts open. Where we are tempted to give in to despair, help us hold fast to joy. We ask these things for ourselves, for those we love, and for those we do not love. Amen. We sing together the things we cannot say, our prayer and our yearning, our hope and our heartbreak, Will you join in our humming meditation, voice still and small? How good it is to hear music from you. I'll need your help telling this story this morning. This is a retelling of a traditional Eastern European story about Rabbi Isaac, who does some things. And your line is, and then what did he do? So I'm going to tell you some stuff. I'll go like this, and you go. And then what did he do? Great. So in Krakow, there lived a guy named Rabbi Isaac. He lived in a small apartment with his family, his wife, many children. And he had a dream one night. And he had a dream that he should travel east to a certain village by a certain river and cross a certain bridge and speak to the man there. And then oh, I'm so glad you asked. So Rabbi Isaac did indeed travel east. He packed up some food and some water and a warm coat, and he said to his family, I will see you later. I have to follow this dream. And the people who lived in the apartment area that he lived in, were like, why are you doing that? That doesn't seem wise. But, he believed in the power of this dream. And then he set out. So he walked for a very long time. His feet hurt, and he looked all around for a certain man by a certain bridge over a certain stream. And he found it. I don't know. Whatever. He found it, okay? I'm so glad you asked. He spoke to a person who was standing at the end of the bridge, and he just had this feeling that he should tell about his dream. He said, I don't really know why I'm telling you this, but I just kind of have this feeling, so I think we should go with it. In a dream, I was told to pack up some food and leave my family and put on a coat and walk east and find a person at the end of a bridge over a certain stream, and now I'm here and I don't know what to do. And the guard, yeah, right, what did he do? Well, the guard scoffed at him and said, listen, it is ridiculous to just be out here following your dreams. I had a dream that in a small apartment of a man called Rabbi Isaac, I would find extraordinary treasure behind the stove. But he lives in a big city in this dream. How many Rabbi Isaacs can there be? What a super common name. So I'll be staying here. What a ridiculous dream. I don't follow my dreams, and I don't think you should either. And then he said, oh yeah, and what's your name, by the way? And what did the other guy do? Isaac goes, oh yeah, my name is Yaakov. Anyway. Oh, he went home and he looked behind his stove and he and his family bought a bigger house. The end.
One of the ways that we live out our mission to create loving community is to contribute financially to the ministries of this congregation and to the good works of our community partners. We are sharing the plate with Carolina Abortion Fund. We know that without money, abortion rights are not enough. We know that it is mostly poor people and people of color who are denied access to appropriate care. And so we celebrate the blessing that is abortion care, and we remember that a pregnant person is a life that matters too, not just the host of a future life. We recall that before the rallying cry was "My body, my choice," it was free abortion on demand without apology. To honor those brave people who paved the way for safety and dignity and reproductive care, we give generously. If you'd like to make a contribution via PayPal to the church for our offering to be split with Carolina Abortion Fund, you can do so on our website. You can also mail a check. Ushers will come forward to collect the offering with long baskets that are safe. Our offering will now be safely, gratefully received.
Should we perhaps use the offering time to handle the feedback situation? Great. Great. Okay, we'll hold off on singing for a second. All right, how's that?
I didn't change anything.
Oh.
Well, it might be better.
Is that better?
No.
Great.
Not worse.
Love that. No, I'm not gonna touch it. All right, you want to sing? Yeah, it's still true. That's right.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. From together we share, and together
Our reading this morning comes to us from Nancy Schaefer. That which holds all. Because she wanted everyone to feel included in her prayer, she said right at the beginning several names for the holy. Spirit, she said, Holy One, Mystery, God. But then thinking these weren't enough ways of addressing that which cannot be addressed, she added particularities, saying, Spirit of life, Spirit of love, Ancient Holy One, mystery we will not ever fully know, gracious God, and also Spirit of this earth, God of Sarah, Gaia, Thou. And then, tongue loosened, she fell to naming superlatives as well. Most creative one, greatest source, closest hope. And even those superlatives for the sacred seemed to her probably redundant, but then she couldn't stop. One who made the stars, she said, although she knew technically a number of those present didn't believe the stars had been made by anyone or thing, but just luckily happened. One who is an entire ocean of compassion, she said, and no one laughed. That which has been present since before the beginning, she said, and the room was silent. And then, although she hadn't imagined it this way, others began to offer names. Peace, said one. One my mother knew, said another. Ancestor, said a third. Wind, rain, breath, said one near the back. Refuge, that which holds all, a child said. Water, someone said, Kuan Yin. Then, womb, witness, great kindness, great eagle, eternal stillness. And then, there wasn't any need to say the things she thought would be important to say. And everyone said hushed, and then someone said, Amen.
Is that better on your ears?
Yes.
In his 1819 sermon entitled Unitarian Christianity, the Reverend William Ellery Channing laid out his principles of a new way of being a Christian. Where previously the word Unitarian had been used only as an epithet, a way of marking and setting apart those preachers or teachers who were not compliant with the accepted teachings of the church, Channing claimed it for the first time, owned it for the first time, made something powerful out of it, a sigil, a brand, a torch held aloft to mark a different way. In this address, he wrote, "We feel it our duty to exercise our reason upon the Bible, to look beyond the letter to the spirit, to seek in the nature of the subject the aim of the writer, his true meaning, and in general to make use of what is known for explaining what is difficult and discovering new truths. We grant that the use of reason in religion is accompanied with danger, but we ask any honest man to look back on the history of the church and say whether the renunciation of it be not still more dangerous. The true inference from the almost endless errors which have darkened theology is not that we are to neglect and disparage our powers, but to exert them more patiently, carefully, uprightly. The worst errors, after all, have sprung up in that church which excludes reason and demands from its members implicit faith. Channing's challenge to the prevailing order of the day was primarily about the power to interpret Scripture. His major contribution that remains relevant today is less about the particulars of the Unitarian Christian way that he outlined in that address, and more about contesting for the power to interpret, to offer meaningful interpretation. So often, I know, the story goes like this, right up until you walk through the doors of the church. I was raised in a faith that taught me not to question the beliefs communicated to me, not to question my teachers, not to question my parents, not to question the men probably in charge. I left that place. I thought I left religious community forever, and then I found this place, a place where I am allowed to think and question and still be in community. I know that that is the story for many of you, and indeed the story for many who find Unitarian Universalism as adults. But I want to suggest to you that the thing that is sacred is not reason itself, but rather the claim that each of you, each of us, has the power to use it. In the intellectual history of Europe, the Enlightenment era of the 17th century is famed for its emphasis on human reason. The study of reason as what is the thing that distinguishes us from the animals. But it is not possible, or indeed right, to study the intellectual history of Europe divorced from the material history of Europe. And the material history of Europe in the 17th century tells us that colonization, enslavement, and exploitation were the order of the day. You don't have to read too far into any journal of practically any colonizer at all to see how they employ their assessment of the reasoning capacities of other human beings to justify violence. If reason is what separates us from the animals, and you are engaged in a project which requires treating human beings as subhuman, all you have to do is accuse them of being primitive or unenlightened or irrational in order to justify what you will do and what we have done. So the emphasis on reason as an end, as opposed to a tool to challenge the authority of the church, for example, is dangerous indeed. It justified colonization, it grounded race studies and eugenics. You may have heard of the Jefferson Bible, in which Thomas Jefferson famously excised all the miracles and all the mentions of resurrection from the New Testament and the Gospels. But what good is such a spiritual tool to a man who was known as a vicious slaver? A man who wrote beautifully about the freedom for some while denying it to others. Perhaps he's focused entirely on the wrong sections of the Holy Book. So this emphasis on reason combined with a position of dominance in society can be actually quite dangerous. If you fast forward to, say, the last 50 years of liberal religion in general, there emerged a certain smugness in the religion of my childhood, a smugness about being the reasonable ones. I did not cross the door of the church seeking it as an adult, though I came in tow of parents who did, who came seeking a church where they were allowed to think. But that's not the story for me. The story for me is that I was raised among the smugness, oh yes, from people who loved me well and people whom I cherish. But that era of Unitarian Universalism is characterized by this attitude. We believe in science, while they believe unreasonable things, like the virgin birth, or the resurrection of the body, or that women can't be priests, or that God hates LGBTQ people. But those are really different things from one another. Believing inexplicable things, growing and nurturing a deep relationship to mystery is not the same as believing hateful things. Our beliefs matter. Believing hateful things is wrong. But believing unreasonable or impossible things is something else entirely. There is extraordinary importance in the power of everyday people to interpret Scripture and their own experience and to call them holy, to open wide to many sources of inspiration, not just the Bible. And most precious of all, to welcome doubt and questions as essential to the life of faith. But when we look around at the recent theological and intellectual history of our faith, we too often observe a nearly dogmatic insistence that the only things that matter are the things that can be explained. What kind of church only wants to talk about the things that can be explained? a fearful church, a domesticated religion. And perhaps, as my colleague, the Reverend Jordan Nelson Long says, a church invested in reasonableness in service of power where it already lies. Nobody ever forced me to believe anything or to assent to things that I found impossible. But there are spiritual wounds left by a dogmatic insistence on reason, too. And I bear them. I showed up to seminary containing and carrying 2 of these unknown spiritual wounds from my Unitarian Universalist childhood. The first was an extraordinary contempt for Christians of all sorts, not bothering to separate beliefs that are harmful because they denigrate human beings, and beliefs that are simply incomprehensible to me. The second was a separation from, suspicion of, and even contempt for mystery itself, which the generations that raised me, whom I love, communicated in force. Now, the notable exception was the one time the lady with the braids from the pagan circle came to talk to my middle school youth group. But aside from Helen, I see some of you going, yeah! Overwhelmingly, the message was that we were not people who believed unusual or impossible things, and that made us good. I've spoken a little to you about my time as a chaplain in the psychiatric emergency room and inpatient psychiatric spiritual care in the hospital while I was in seminary. I had received in the church of my childhood excellent ethical instruction and great sex ed that did not teach me about what happens when I run up against my limit, when I cannot do hardly anything at all to affect the extraordinary suffering in front of me. I also was limited in this way. I could not even see the spiritual tools that some of my patients had to help them feel less alone. I don't know how many of you have ever been either as a patient or a practitioner in a psychiatric emergency room, but it is a terrifying place. They keep the lights on. It's not particularly restful. The goal is simply to keep you alive. It is very isolating. And some of my patients had an extraordinarily strong faith and a powerful relationship to God. And I could not even see that as a spiritual resource for them. So unable was I to relate to mystery. Because I did not have adequate respect or competence in mystery and the power of their belief in things I found mysterious, I was not able to see the things they did have available to them when they didn't have very much else. This put me in the position to pity people. If you pity someone, you cannot give them proper care. I know some of you are teachers, some of you are parents, and some of you are social workers. I know that you know that when you pity someone, you are not giving them respectful or proper care. Because I was encountering all of this extraordinary human suffering for the first time in my young life, I was entirely overwhelmed by it and pretty tortured by it, and I didn't know what to do or where to go or how to handle it. I was also guest preaching a lot on Sundays, so that didn't help because I couldn't go to church about it. And I couldn't access this connection to something greater than myself, because even though I did have what now I would call spiritual practices that would sustain me, I had a major intellectual block. I couldn't turn these concerns over. I couldn't let them go. I was entirely unable to do anything except think about all I could not do for the people in my care. And eventually what I had to do was to just choose to set that aside. I think I have told you that I went to the chapel to sing. And I did that because studies have shown that singing lowers cortisol and connects you to sound bigger than, right? But I needed someone to say, studies have shown. And I was like, okay, off to the chapel. Instead of knowing what people have known since we developed vocal cords, which is that in music there is something beyond us and bigger than us. I know that you know. So in the end, I didn't care about actually having figured out anything at all that I believe about God. I just went to the chapel to sing and to turn it over and to try to give it up. So this is my question for you. Have you made an idol of reason? And has it dried out your life? Do you scoff at the mystery like the guy in our story in order to protect yourself from trembling? Or else, if you are a lover of mystery, do you keep quiet about it so as to be esteemed by all the reasonable people? Have you had a turning point in your life where you welcomed in mystery? Have you become curious about things you could not explain? And how have you grown? The late Forrest Church, Unitarian Universalist minister and theologian, wrote, "Unitarian transcendentalism suggests that by sheer rationality, we cannot come close to comprehending the mystery of being alive and having to die. Life is a miracle that can't be explained without explaining it away. Our most profound encounters lead inexorably from the rational to the trans-rational realm. In a principled flight from irrationality, rationalists betray reason by losing sight of the trans-rational realm, where rationalism is not rejected, but moved past. This is the realm of myth and parable, of poetry and paradox. Wholeness cannot be achieved until the two realms of sign and symbol, fact and fancy, are explored as one." So this is the question about so-called irrational belief, or about any beliefs at all. How does it shape you? Not is it true, because how can you tell? But how does it shape you? Does it make you braver? Does it make you kinder? Does it grow your heart and your dreams for yourself and for the world? This year, I have fallen in love with someone whose father died 2 months before my mother. And his father was always trying to get him to go back to church. He grew up Presbyterian and he left it, and it wasn't really his thing. And his father thought, well, you really might like the Unitarians, and in fact, let me help you out. I'll Google the churches closest to your house. And before he died, his father sent him the address of this place, which he did not go to, which is why I'm now dating him instead of being his minister. And there are a couple other things like that. My family and I have decided that when we see bluebirds, it's my mom visiting. He was telling this to his mother. She said, whenever I see bluebirds, I think of your father. So to me, right, I am, as much as I am like a sort of hopeful lover of mystery, I'm not really a big signs guy. So I'm like, oh, well, that's a nice coincidence, or I guess there's bluebirds everywhere, or, well, there's only a couple churches around, so which one was he really going to send you? Or, there are all sorts of ways to kind of explain away these sort of sweet, mysterious happenings. But if I had thought about it more carefully, and if I had been a little more grounded in my relationship to mystery, I might have thought about it this way. Could being open to the mysterious happenings in my new relationship dull the terror that comes when you place your heart in the hands of another? Because if so, sign me up. So I wonder for you, is there a place in your life where you can be a little more open to mystery? It doesn't mean you don't think. It doesn't mean you don't evaluate your decisions or the choices you're making in your work or in your friendships or in your family or in your love life, but it does mean, is there a dimension over which you have no control that is calling you forward a little? On a political level, of course, reasonableness is very dangerous. The South Asian non-binary activist and poet Alok Vaidmanan writes this: "Impossible is enlisted as a foot soldier for the status quo. Its purpose is to reinscribe the political coordinates of existence, stifle any attempt to stray anywhere else. When they say that's impossible, they mean don't imagine otherwise. And when you do just that, they will dismiss you as naive and idealistic. So what? Reality is a construction project with no completion date in sight. Of course a camera cannot capture itself. Of course a telescope cannot see what it doesn't. Of course they will try to delegitimize any viable alternative. But are we trying to be legitimate, or are we trying to live? Have bad manners. Dream anyway." How many of you remember the Catonsville Nine? A couple. Many of you were alive. I'll tell you what they are. They were 9 Catholics who burned draft files in May of 1968 in protest of the Vietnam War. A few of them served prison time. They endured a long, drawn-out trial. And during that time, the Episcopal theologian William Stringfellow spoke at an evening church meeting. He said to them, to these devout Catholics, "Remember now that the state has only one power it can use against human beings: death. The state can persecute you, prosecute you, imprison you, exile you, and execute you. All of these mean the same thing. The state can consign you to death. The grace of Jesus Christ in this life is that death fails. There is nothing the state can do to you or me which we need fear." Likely, if you are here, you are not a Christian, and even if you are more Christian-leaning than most Unitarian Universalists, like I am now, perhaps you do not believe in the grace of Jesus Christ as a power that overcomes death. But also, perhaps what you can see is how the strength of their belief led these people to take extraordinarily courageous anti-war action, to put their lives and their freedom on the line for their convictions. To long for peace in a world so at war is to believe impossible and irrational things. It is not the belief itself, and perhaps for you the traditional Christian mysteries are not of major interest, and so if that's the case, you can set them aside. But what we ought not set aside is what a relationship to mystery in our religious and spiritual life makes possible for us in the social and political world in which we live. This is why Adrienne Marie Brown, a spiritual and intellectual leader of the Movement for Black Lives, writes that organizing is science fiction. We imagine worlds other than the ones we've got. We practice living in them. We create them as we go. We make the road by walking. I have a colleague who said that the best advice she ever received in ministry was that if ever anyone popped into her mind, she'd just send them a note checking on them. I think she has long since given up trying to explain why. But the number of times that she has caught someone at a moment where they most needed it was enough evidence for her to give up trying to figure out what's going on and just trust it. From Through the Looking Glass. Alice laughed. "There's no use trying," she said. "One can't believe impossible things." "Well, I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Some of the things that I long for in our world feel impossible Is that true for you also? Do the things you long for feel impossible sometimes? Yeah. Unfortunately, I do not have a solution to this problem. What I do have, though, is just the opening of the door to mystery in my own life and what I am trying to let it teach me. And I offer that to you in the hopes that you will look for where mystery opens the door for you, and you will be teachable. May it be so for you and so for us all. Amen.
Will you join me in our chalice extinguishing words found in your order of service? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
When you leave today, you can take these little vials of water that we collected last week and have sanitized in our water communion service. These are the hopes and dreams and the sorrow and the power of our collected community through time in a tiny bottle for you to keep in your pocket and use when you need it. If you're new or feeling new, we'll have a new member class beginning on Sunday, October 10th. You can go check out the visitors table. We'll put this in the newsletter. We're trying to figure out if we're going to offer it in person or online, or some combination of both. So if that's you and you're thinking, boy, I'd really like to turn this handwritten name tag into a permanent name tag, boy, I'd really like to get to know some people better and explore a relationship to this congregation, please do let us know, and we'll send a Google form. We'd love to know what you're more comfortable with and what's more meaningful for you as we try to navigate our in-person and online reality. If you are in person, you might be thinking, you know, I show up on Sunday and I just really wish I could stand around with a couple other people and be helpful. And if that's you having that thought, Ken Williams has a clipboard. Ken Williams is our lead usher, and he would love to sign you up to come a little early and stand in the front and show us your best smile just with, you know, this part of your face, to welcome people in, show them where to go, and be a part of the welcoming ministry of the congregation. So if that's you, Ken's your guy, and he'll be out on the patio after the service attempting to sign you up. Ken also suggests this is a good job for any unemployed choir members, which you will then, which you may abandon when we start singing as a choir again. Finally, we say goodbye to everybody joining us online. It has been so good to worship with you in this way. And if you're coming for our drive-through water communion vial pickup, we'll be sitting out in the front waiting to see you this week, and we might do it next week too.